What happens when two of the most powerful personalities in daytime television sit across from each other, smiling, while something unspoken simmers just beneath the surface? The lights rise slowly inside the studio of The Ellen Show. Soft applause fills the room, warm, familiar, almost comforting. The kind of applause that makes everything feel safe. Predictable. But today, something is different. The air feels heavier. Even before the cameras rolled, whispers were already moving through the backstage corridors. Producers spoke in quieter tones than usual. Assistants checked schedules twice. A stage manager, normally relaxed, kept glancing toward the guest dressing room like he was waiting for something, or someone, to shift the energy. Because today's guest wasn't just anyone. It was Steve Harvey. And while audiences expected laughter, jokes, playful banter, behind the scenes, there was tension. Steve stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his suit. Perfect. Sharp. Controlled. But his eyes were focused, steady, deliberate, like a man preparing for something more than a casual interview. A producer stepped in. "We're ready for you. Ellen's looking forward to this." Steve gave a small nod. "Good." Across the hallway, Ellen DeGeneres sat quietly, flipping through cue cards. She paused longer than usual on one of them, her smile fading for just a second before returning. "Are we sticking with this?" she asked. A producer hesitated. "Feel it out." That wasn't the kind of answer that calmed nerves. Before we go deeper into this moment, if you enjoy cinematic storytelling that pulls you into real feeling tension like this, consider subscribing, because what unfolds here isn't just drama, it's a lesson in composure, pressure, and knowing when to stand your ground. Out in the studio, the audience buzzed with excitement. Bright lights washed over the polished set. Music kicked in, upbeat and familiar. Ellen walked out first. Confident. Smiling. Dancing lightly as the crowd cheered. But something was slightly off. Her movements were a touch smaller. Her smile didn't linger as long. She sat down, took a breath. "And today," she began, "we have someone you all know." Cheers erupted instantly. "A man who brings energy, wisdom, and maybe just a little bit of trouble." Laughter rolled across the audience. "Please welcome Steve Harvey." The applause doubled. Steve walked out, commanding the room with ease. He waved, smiling, but there was a restraint, like he was holding something back. He sat down across from her. For a moment, everything looked normal. Two professionals. Two smiles. But then came a pause. A fraction too long. "So. Steve," Ellen said, leaning slightly forward, "it's been a while." "Yeah," he replied calmly. "It has." Another pause. "You've been busy." "Always." His tone was measured. Not playful. Ellen tilted her head. "I've seen a few interviews, you've been saying some interesting things." A subtle shift rippled through the audience. Steve met her gaze. "Depends on what you call interesting." A few people laughed, but it was uncertain. "Well," Ellen continued, her voice just slightly sharper, "you've had opinions." Steve nodded. "I always have." From the control room, producers leaned closer to their screens. "Stay on this," one whispered. Because something was building. Ellen crossed her legs, still smiling, but her eyes more focused now. "So today, we're just going to talk openly, right?" "Always do," Steve replied. Light applause filled the room, but it felt forced, like the audience was trying to keep things comfortable. Ellen took a breath, glanced briefly at her cards, then back at him. Her tone shifted. "So let's talk about what you said." The room went still. Steve didn't move. "Let's." And just like that, the calm shattered. "So when you said some hosts don't really connect with their audience," Ellen began, her voice controlled but firm, "were you talking about shows like this?" A murmur spread through the crowd. Steve leaned back slightly, hands clasped. If the shoe fits, people wear it. The audience reacted, half gasps, half nervous laughter. Ellen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's interesting. Because I've always believed connection is what built this show. And I respect that, Steve replied smoothly. But belief and reality don't always line up. The tension thickened. Ellen leaned forward now. So you're saying this isn't real? I'm saying, Steve said calmly, that sometimes what people see isn't the full story. A sharper murmur. Ellen's composure wavered, just slightly. You're making a lot of assumptions. No, he said quietly. I'm making observations. The audience shifted in their seats. Ellen laughed lightly, but it sounded forced. You know, it's easy to come onto someone else's show and criticize. Steve didn't flinch. It's harder to hear it. That line hit. The room went almost silent. Ellen's smile tightened. Her fingers tapped lightly against her knee. I've built this platform on kindness. And that's a beautiful thing, Steve said. When it's consistent. The word lingered. Consistent. Ellen blinked, her expression changing now, less composed, more defensive. Are you questioning my integrity? I'm asking the same questions people already have, he replied. The audience reacted again, louder this time. Ellen's voice rose slightly. That's not fair. Steve stayed calm. Fair isn't always comfortable. Her posture shifted. Shoulders tighter. Voice sharper. You don't know what happens behind the scenes here. He leaned forward just a little. Exactly. That moment landed like a shockwave. For a split second, even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Ellen's eyes flickered, not anger, not fully, but something closer to frustration breaking through control. You're crossing a line, she said. Steve shook his head slowly. No. I'm standing on one. The audience erupted, some clapping, others stunned. Ellen sat back, visibly shaken now. The calm she entered with was slipping. And what exactly are you implying? She pressed. Steve paused. Looked directly at her. Then spoke, slower than before. I'm implying that being liked, and being real, aren't always the same thing. Silence. Heavy, undeniable silence. Ellen's expression froze. For the first time, she didn't have a quick response. The audience leaned forward, completely locked in. And then, she laughed. But this time, it wasn't controlled. It was sharp. Defensive. Wow, she said. So this is what you came here to do? Steve stood up. Not abruptly. But deliberately. I came here, he said, removing his mic slowly, to have an honest conversation. Gasps filled the room. The crew froze. And sometimes, he continued, placing the mic on the table, honesty makes people uncomfortable. Ellen stood too, now visibly emotional. Or maybe you just enjoy creating it. Steve looked at her one last time. Calm. Unshaken. No, he said quietly. I just don't run from it. He stepped back. The audience didn't know whether to clap, or stay silent. He turned. And walked off the stage. No music. No cue. Just silence. Ellen stood there, alone under the lights. The energy completely shifted. The audience, once lively, now sat in stunned stillness. She took a breath, trying to regain composure. But it was clear, something had broken. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But undeniably. Backstage, the tension was even heavier. Producers rushed. Crew members whispered. But Steve didn't stop walking. Because sometimes, the strongest statement, is knowing when to leave. And in that moment, the lesson wasn't about who was right. It was about presence, control, and the power of standing firm, even when the room turns against you. Because confidence isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't shake when challenged. It doesn't fold under pressure. And it doesn't need approval to exist. The cameras eventually faded. The lights dimmed. But the moment lingered. Not as drama, but as a reminder that truth, when spoken calmly, can echo louder than anything else. The moment the question lands, the air inside the studio tightens like a wire pulled too far. Ellen doesn't blink. Steve doesn't move. And for a split second, it feels like time itself hesitates. So when you said some hosts don't really connect with their audience, Ellen repeats, her voice steady but carrying a sharper edge now, were you talking about shows like this? A ripple moves through the crowd, low murmurs, shifting posture, people glancing at each other as if silently asking, did she really just go there? Steve leans back slightly, shoulders relaxed, fingers interlocked. If the shoe fits, he says calmly, people tend to wear it. A mix of gasps and uneasy laughter breaks out. Ellen smiles. But this time, it's different. It's tighter. Controlled. Almost mechanical. That's interesting, she says, her tone still light on the surface. Because connection is exactly what built this show. Steve nods slowly. And I respect that, he replies. But sometimes what builds something, isn't always what sustains it. The words don't hit loudly. They sink. Heavy. The audience quiets. Ellen shifts in her seat, crossing her legs again, but quicker this time. Her hands move, subtle, restless. You've been doing a lot of talking lately, she says. Interviews, podcasts, opinions. I've always had opinions, Steve answers, his tone even. But now you're sharing them in ways that affect people, she presses. And now people are listening, he replies. That line draws a reaction, some claps, quickly fading. Ellen leans forward. So let's be clear, she says, dropping the playful tone completely. Are you suggesting something about me, or this show? Steve tilts his head slightly. I'm suggesting, he says, choosing each word carefully, that sometimes perception and reality don't line up. The room goes still again. Ellen exhales slowly, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. That's a very vague statement, she says. It's a very real one, he replies. The tension spikes. You can feel it in the silence. Ellen laughs, but it's not light anymore. It's sharper, defensive. You know, it's easy to come onto someone else's platform and make statements like that. Steve leans forward now for the first time. And it's harder, he says quietly, to hear them. That line lands harder than anything so far. A few audience members clap instinctively. Others sit frozen. Ellen's expression shifts, her eyes narrowing slightly, her posture tightening. I've spent years building something positive, she says, her voice rising just a fraction. Something kind. And that matters, Steve responds. It really does. A pause. Then, but kindness isn't just what you show when the cameras are on. The words drop like a weight. A collective inhale moves through the audience. Ellen's face changes. Not dramatically. But enough. Her jaw tightens. Her shoulders lift slightly. Are you questioning my integrity? She asks. Steve doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't lean back. Doesn't break eye contact. I'm asking the same questions people already have, he says. The audience reacts louder this time, some gasps, some applause, some stunned silence. Ellen shakes her head, laughing again, but now it feels forced, almost strained. That's not fair, she says. Fair isn't always comfortable, Steve replies. Her hands move again, tapping against her leg. You don't know what happens behind the scenes here, she says, more firmly now. Steve nods once. You're right, he says. A brief pause. Then he adds, but that's exactly why people ask. That's the turning point. You can feel it. The shift from tension to confrontation. Ellen stands. Not abruptly, but decisively. You're crossing a line, she says. Steve remains seated for a moment longer. Calm. Composed. Then he stands too, but slower. No, he says quietly. I'm standing on one. The audience erupts, some clapping, others visibly shocked. Ellen's composure is slipping now. Her voice, once controlled, carries emotion. And what exactly are you implying, she demands. Steve pauses. Looks around the studio. At the audience. At the cameras. Then back at her. I'm implying, he says slowly, that being liked, and being real, aren't always the same thing. Silence. Complete silence. Even the audience doesn't react immediately. Because the weight of that statement takes a second to land. Ellen's expression freezes. For the first time, she doesn't respond. Doesn't smile. Doesn't deflect. Just stands there. And that silence. It says everything. Backstage, producers are scrambling. Do we cut? Someone whispers. No, another replies. Stay on it. Because. This isn't just television anymore. This is something else. Something raw. Something real, at least in the moment. Ellen finally exhales. A sharp breath. Then she laughs again, but this time, it's different. It's not controlled. It's not polished. It's defensive. So this is what you came here for, she says. To make a scene. Steve reaches up slowly, and removes his microphone. The small click echoes louder than it should. Gasps fill the room. I came here, he says calmly, to have an honest conversation. He places the mic gently on the table. And sometimes honesty, he adds, makes people uncomfortable. Ellen steps forward, her voice rising. Or maybe you just enjoy creating discomfort. Steve looks at her. Still calm. Still steady. No, he says. I just don't run from it. And then, he turns. No dramatic gesture. No raised voice. Just a simple decision. And he walks. The audience doesn't know how to react. Some stand. Some stay seated. Some clap. Others remain completely silent. The energy is fractured. Uncertain. And as Steve reaches the edge of the stage, he doesn't look back. The lights feel harsher now. Brighter. Exposing. Ellen stands alone in the center. Her expression caught between control and something deeper. Something unsettled. The cameras stay on her. Waiting. The audience watches. Holding its breath. And that's where everything hangs, right on the edge of what comes next. The silence that follows isn't just quiet, it's heavy. Ellen slowly lowers herself back into her chair. The movement feels deliberate, like she's trying to regain control not just of the show, but of the moment. The audience shifts again, unsure whether to clap, to speak, or to stay completely still. She exhales. Adjusts her posture. For a second, she looks down. Then back up at the cameras. And something has changed. Not broken. Not defeated. But, affected. All right, she says softly, her voice no longer carrying the same brightness. Well, that was unexpected. A few nervous laughs ripple through the room. But they fade quickly. Because the atmosphere hasn't recovered. Not yet. She pauses again. And this time, the pause isn't awkward. It's reflective. You know, she continues, more grounded now, we talk a lot about kindness here. Her tone is slower. Measured. Less performance, more presence. And sometimes, that conversation isn't easy. The audience listens closely now. No distractions. No noise. Just attention. Ellen folds her hands together, looking out across the crowd. And sometimes, she adds, people challenge you in ways you don't expect. A subtle nod. Almost to herself. And maybe, that's part of growth too. The tension begins to shift. Not disappear. But transform. The cameras pan slightly across the audience, faces still processing, still absorbing what just happened. Backstage, movement continues. Producers whisper. Crew members exchange looks. But on stage, it's quieter. More controlled. Ellen takes another breath. Then she looks toward the side of the stage. For a moment, it almost feels like she might call him back. Like something unresolved is still hanging in the air. But she doesn't. Instead, she turns back to the audience. Smiles, softly this time. Not forced. Not exaggerated. Just, real. Sometimes, she says, you don't get the last word. A faint murmur moves through the crowd. But that doesn't mean the conversation ends. That line lands differently. Not sharp. Not confrontational. Reflective. The kind of line that stays with you. Meanwhile, in the hallway behind the stage, Steve slows down. Just for a second. The noise of the studio fades behind him. The energy, still echoing. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look shaken. Just thoughtful. He adjusts his jacket. Takes a breath. And then, almost to himself, he says quietly, sometimes you don't need to stay, to be heard. And that's it. No cameras. No audience. Just a moment of clarity. Back inside, the show continues, but it's not the same. It can't be. Because something real, something unscripted, just cut through the surface. And moments like that, don't just disappear. They linger. They challenge. They make people think. As the lights begin to dim slightly and the segment transitions, the audience remains quieter than usual. More reflective. Less reactive. Because what they witnessed wasn't just entertainment. It was pressure. Presence. And two people standing on very different sides of the same moment. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not who was right. Not who won. But how each person chose to stand. One holding composure through calm. The other navigating emotion in real time. Because life does that. It puts you in moments you didn't plan. It challenges your control. Your image. Your truth. And in those moments, you have a choice. You can react. Or you can respond. You can raise your voice. Or you can hold your ground. You can stay. Or you can walk away. And sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's strength. It's knowing your voice doesn't need noise, to be powerful. The cameras fade. The lights soften. But the message remains. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. And sometimes, that's what hits the hardest.